You know what we're not slick about?
Tell me. Because there's a long list.
Texting people when we shouldn't be texting.
I'm so embarrassed. I'll say it. I texted Steve Forbes at 6:59 yesterday.
What was he doing, Joe? Well, I texted Wes. I texted Wes in the middle of something. I realized, oh crap, that's right. He's calling the Duke Pitt game. Duh. You know, it's like, I should probably do a better job of A, when games are being played. B,
it's not hard to look at a schedule. I just assumed Wake was only playing on Tuesday or Wednesday.
What time?
I didn't even know anybody played on Monday.
Did Forbes text you back?
He did. He did.
At halftime?
No.
That'd be funny if he texted you
on his way
halftime.
Home.
What time's the UNC State game?
Tonight? 8 o'clock.
Do we know what time for real? Do I have to double check that?
No, it's 8 o'clock.
Text.
I'm only going one morning coffee today.
Text Kevin Keats at 8:15.
Well, I just figure it's payback for all the times Roy and Kevin have called during the show.
Dude.
At like 3:01.
Yeah, that's definitely a classic. Y'all don't know what we do you? That's good stuff. Anyway, you ready to get going?
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's do it. Let's podcast alongside Joe Giglio. I'm Joe Ovias inside Eford Studios, downtown Raleigh. Thanks to Empire Properties and thanks to Copiers Plus. Check them out online at copiers-plus.com.
They can keep track of all of our timing issues for us.
Would probably
give me a spreadsheet.
Yeah,
print it out.
There's the cloud and the document management, and maybe we can have like a dynamic Excel spreadsheet of some sort to let
Here's
you know.
The Big Four master schedule, Giglio. I'll have to get Drew on that for me.
That would be it. So big thanks to Copiers Plus. Check them out online at copiers-plus.com. We're not going to waste any time this morning because there's a big game tonight.
Play the freaking hits, Joe. Let's go.
At PNC Arena. Let's bring on Wes Durham on the Heister Automotive Group hotline. Wes, apologies. I should have not have texted you gossipy things right before a game between Duke and Pitt. Apologies for that, Wes.
No, that's fine. It's good to see you guys. Happy January and Happy New Year. A little late, I guess, into the year.
Yeah.
Can I still say Happy New Year? Can I still do that?
Yeah,
we just hit double digits, but it's okay.
By the way, if you're watching on YouTube, Wes is in a Pittsburgh hotel room right now after calling that Pitt Duke game. We'll talk a little bit about that.
Looks like he's in Tuscaloosa.
Right. Are you sure?
T-Town.
Are you sure you're not in some sort of like Bear Bryant super
graduate hotel? Some Bear Bryant graduate hotel in Tuscaloosa.
What is that houndstooth, man? That curtain
prevents himself from making CFP selection committee joke.
Yeah, thank you. That was funny. This is the Hotel Monaco in downtown Pittsburgh.
Oh.
Okay, I'm going to do. I promised myself I'd never do this when I did y'all's show, but see that building right there through the window in Pittsburgh this morning?
Yeah,
that, boys, is U.S. Steel. That's where America was made, right there. So there you go.
For all of my kvetching about adding Pitt to the ACC, that is one of my favorite cities.
Yeah,
I wish they had the tournament there.
You know what, Giglio? I'm going to jump right in with you on that. I am a huge fan of this city. The people here are terrific. They love sports. And last night when the ball game started, we had a full Oakland Zoo, largest student turnout they'd had in a long time, near sellout house for Duke and Pitt. And it was the environment that I think we had thought when Jamie Dixon brought Pitt in this league in 2013-14 that we were going to see on a regular basis. And I give Jeff Capel a lot of credit. It was a tough night last night, but I saw genuine interest and enthusiasm about, and you guys know this, a basketball program that 8 years ago, they probably should have just shut down in mid-January in Kevin Stallings last year and called it off, to be honest. But no, I think it's a very underrated city. In fact, I would tell, and Giglio, you've been here for football. I know that. I would tell any ACC fan, you ought to make this trip. It's worth your endeavor, especially in the fall. Rarely do you get Pitt at home in football with the Pirates at home just because of the facility configurations. But I would tell you it's a very enjoyable time. And when you come with the Hall of Famer who's won more than 1,000 games, he knows where all the good restaurants are too, by the way. So that helped last night. That helped the other night for sure.
Did you go? Did you and Jim Boeheim? You're referencing Jim Boeheim. who was on the broadcast with you last night. Did you guys go to a nice Italian restaurant?
We did.
What'd you get?
I apparently was admonished by the Hall of Famer.
No, not Jim Boeheim would never admonish.
Well, he does it in a very kidding way.
Of course.
But we went to a place whose specialty, it's alla familia. It's an Italian restaurant on the hill. And I got a small petite filet because that's what I'm eating these days, a small petite filet. Boeheim was looking at me like, you can't come to an Italian restaurant where they specialize in veal chops and order a small petite filet. And I went, hey, coach, that's kind of what I was looking for tonight. Sorry. But it was fun. No, he's a great conversationalist, and we've had wonderful time doing these 2 games. And we got, a couple more to go, and we're pretty excited. And Corey deserves a lot of credit too. It's been a nice 3-man weave, as I like to say, of broadcasting.
Mm-hmm. Just don't ask Boeheim about Roy Williams or Mike Krzyzewski, even though he has like unbelievable friendships with both of them. Just don't ask him to put any of their stuff in context about their career. Because apparently that is what leads you to trouble.
Wow. Speaking of scars from previous interviews.
Yeah, I was getting ready to say, now we got strays for Giglio's career, the journalistic career kicking in a little bit.
Yeah, well, what's funny is you talk about great conversations. I noticed that last night watching the game that, you talk about the Oakland Zoo and it's a great crowd, but Duke took that crowd out real quick. And when they were up 30 or whatever it was, I could tell you guys went into what I like to call sports talk radio protocol, where there's really not a lot to talk about in terms of the game because it's decided it's a blowout. And at that point, you're just having conversations. So I kind of caught that last night, which gets to the overall question about Duke, where they have not had a game like this where things come easy to them in the last stretch for a variety of reasons. They've gone up against some physical teams. Cal Filipowski's had to power through that, but they've had other guys step up. The Syracuse game was a bit of a slog until the second half when Mitchell had taken over and you had guys like McCain hitting shots. Tyrese Proctor's been coming off the bench. They're trying to integrate him back into the lineup. Things came easy to Duke last night. And when they're moving the ball and they're hitting shots and Filipowski's able to operate, you can get seduced by this Blue Devil team and how good they look.
I think you're exactly right. I think the other thing too is that this is remember last year we had a front row seat. I was doing the game. You guys were both there when they bottomed out in Raleigh, right? They bottomed out and then started the ascent back up.
Yeah.
But the ascent had some bumps in it. Well, in some ways, the problems that afflicted that team last year in January with losses to NC State and then remember on the road at Clemson, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. This team maybe saw that earlier in the year because they played Arizona. They went through that situation with Arizona. They've gotten healthy. I thought the Baylor win showed you really kind of where they were potentially could go. And then even though it was a bit of a rock fight last Saturday at South Bend, I thought the fact that Filipowski didn't play well, Mitchell did for a second straight game, kind of energized the rest of those guys. And then last night, in fact, John Shire told us this yesterday afternoon at the shoot-around. We want to try and come in here and kind of defend the will, play cocky, but cocky in a good way, not cocky in a, hey, look at us, we're Duke, but cocky in a confident way. And I think they did that last night. I think the shot making was certainly a big part of it, but let's don't lose sight the fact that they defended really well against an explosive team. There was no easy catch for Blake Henson last night. Bub Carrington was 0 for the first half. His 10 points came basically in the last 12 minutes of the game. And I felt like Duke kind of put their stamp on being one of the top 2 or 3 teams in the ACC for the rest of the way last night. Now, a lot of work to do. They got Georgia Tech Saturday and then a week off before they host Pitt back at Cameron. But I think they have kind of shown you, at least in the early stages of January, they've got great capability of being that team.
All right, so Duke back on track. Amazing what happens when you hit 11 threes in a basketball game. My primary concern going into this year about Duke, their outside shooting. We got tonight over in Raleigh, North Carolina, 3-0.
The good old days, boys.
Speaking of teams who have confidence in winning ugly at the Pittsburgh game, Joe and I are on the same page. That was the canary coming out of the coal mine for the Tar Heels, really moving on from last year. And then they get State, who I thought played their most complete game on Saturday against Virginia, where it was like, State doesn't have Jarkel Joyner or Quavion Smith anymore, but they do have a bunch of other like good players. And I thought they all seemingly played their role on Saturday night. How do you see this thing shaping up tonight in Raleigh?
It's interesting, and I think I heard you guys say this on one of your previous shows. Carolina's gotten back to the running and the rebounding, haven't they?
Mm-hmm.
Carolina's kind of, hey, we're not going to play those two bigs anymore. We're going to play 4 out, 1 in, and we're going to kind of, modernize the game. And yet Carolina's found themselves that Baycott, Jalen Washington lineup. That small sequence of that lineup has been interesting for me. I think tonight has a chance to be electric. I really do. I think Billis and Dave O'Brien, who've got the call on ESPN, have got an unbelievable opportunity to see the old days of State Carolina. And I think you're going to see end to end. I think there are a lot of intriguing matchups tonight. I think point guard is going to be one of them.
Mm-hmm.
I really like the way Kevin has brought his team along. I'm not sure, the game at South Bend, for the fact that it set the sport back maybe 50 years the other night. I'm of the belief that not many teams, unless they've been through some stuff together, find a way to win that game like Kevin's team did the other night at Notre Dame.
Mm-hmm.
And that's proven, by the way, to be a pretty good win based on Notre Dame winning in Atlanta last night, the way they played Duke, those kinds of things. But I'm excited for this game tonight. It takes me back. I'm the old school guy here. I know that State Carolina's a thing.
Yeah.
And I'm looking forward to seeing kind of how the momentum and the personality of the game goes tonight. I think at times it'll be horrifically bad, but I also think at times it's going to be unbelievable to watch the shot making and the playmaking.
Yeah, I don't think we'll get Marcus Page, TJ Warren, but I'm getting those kind of vibes, like a game where you're like, okay, both of these teams are actually pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The problem for State in this game historically is in the paint. And how Armando Baycott, I mean, we have enough data from Armando Baycott and how this game typically goes.
This is why you make a trade with Clemson for the enforcer.
Yeah.
This is the exact reason. You traded Jack Clark from Ben Middlebrook.
If NC State's going to have a chance in this game, outside the obvious of got to make shots, shout out to Cindy Lowe, it's weathering Armando Baycott and how they're going to officiate the game, which is kind of key. Are they going to have the pandemic rules, as you like to talk about, and kind of let them play? More importantly, though, I do think that Carolina is going to get theirs rebounding wise, because that's, again, historically, that's how it usually plays out. Carolina can be forced into turnover prone situations.
Yes.
There's one thing that we do know about a Kevin Keats team and this NC State team. When they ratchet up the defensive intensity, things can get turned around. And that's what I'm looking at for NC State.
This is his best defensive team. Caden Taylor's his best on the ball.
Yeah. Carolina's going to the freshman wall with Elliot Cadeau, right?
Mm-hmm.
That triple has been good and he stepped up, but this team can be forced into a ton of turnovers, which will drive Hubert Davis nuts. To me, that's kind of the key right now.
Well, and let me go back to Jaden Taylor, Giglio. That's Leaky Black for Kevin Keats.
Mm-hmm.
That's exactly who that is. That is the stopper. I mean, the best shooter, the best perimeter player on the opposing team is going to be defended by Jaden Taylor, bottom line. And look, I think Parker played great on Saturday against Virginia. I thought he played with poise. Motivated, yeah.
Old school. Speaking of old school,
yeah.
I'm from Virginia. They didn't want me.
Right.
Okay.
And then the other piece of this is guys like, and this is where Kevin deserves a lot of credit, I think. Guys like Diarra, those guys under Middlebrooks, you mentioned a moment ago. This is the reason I think his team has a real legitimate chance to be a factor in this, because those guys fully embrace their roles. It's more than just, hey, 4 guys and boy, that DJ Burns is a fun guy to watch play, isn't he? No, he's a hell of a basketball player. And that we got to get around the fact that the guy is, he's got soft hands, incredible touch around the basket, and he's fun to watch. He's fun to be around. He is a terrific personality in this league. There was a player in the late 70s in the ACC named Chubby Wells, who was just an unbelievable character of the game at Clemson. DJ Burns reminds me of Chubby Wells for the old people in the group. But I also think, too, he's also a first-team All-ACC talent if NC State has the kind of year I think they want to have.
He's such an interesting, you say Chubby Wells. I can't remember a player who was so good at one thing, but also a liability on the defensive side of the ball. So
Yeah.
I think that's what Kevin's best work has been, particularly in these last two games, has been, the comeback at Notre Dame. DJ was on the bench.
He was.
Yes, he was.
He scored the two baskets to win the game.
But
and so was Horn, by the way. Horn and Burns were both on the bench during the run from down 7 to get the game tied. Yeah.
But when DJ was needed,
He came in.
drawn up play.
Yeah, we talk about this all the time. Your coach, as a coach, your number one job is for everyone to understand their roles.
Mm-hmm.
And the three of us have had this conversation many times in this portal NIL world. When you reset your roster every year, it's really hard in November and December to learn on the fly. And I think you're starting to see NC State here in January figure out, like Amo Diarra, for example, plays a lot and was an important part of that Notre Dame win. Then he only plays 3 minutes against Virginia. Well, guess what they're going to need tonight? Mo Diarra. It's just...
They're going to need Mohamed Diarra tonight in a lot of ways because he's the guy you at least trust to go get rebounds around a player like Baycott because he did it in the SEC at Missouri last year for Gates.
Yeah. I think it'll be an interesting game tonight. Obviously, we have all kinds of data that says Carolina wins this basketball game. Other than that, State has won 2 of the last 3 in Raleigh. But Keats 3-9, Gottman 2-11, Sid 1-10 versus these guys. Like, how do you walk in tonight thinking that Carolina doesn't win this basketball game?
Right.
I mean, gotta make shots, Joe. Gotta make shots.
Absolutely.
It's like I joked with some friends about the Dolphins and the Bills this past weekend. Like, the Dolphins will be fine. And I'm like, nah, man, I've seen this movie. I saw this movie back in the 90s. 90s are so hot right now. There's a reboot for all these types of things. Yeah. So before we get, speaking of the NFL, before we get out of here, Wes.
I solved problems for your boy. He should have listened to me. Everyone should have listened to me on that one. Arthur Smith should be Carolina's football coach right now. That he should have listened. Bubba should have listened to me too.
Didn't work out in Atlanta though.
Obvious. What's it like working with the authority, Joe Giglio?
Oh, tell me that wasn't the solution,
man. Wes.
Tell me that.
Well, it could be one day. It just wasn't then.
Wes, you have been doing this long enough to know that in this business,
everybody hits 100 once.
No, it's not even that. We've all got it figured out. We've all got it figured out. And when we're not putting together and managing salary caps because we just happened to go to capfriendly.com that day or whatever it is, and things like that. We're also caveman lawyers, because we watched Law and Order once.
Netflix law degree. Thank you.
We can actually go into deep diving conversations like NIL and Title IX and contracts and how to get out of a grant of rights. We've all got it figured out. We're just these, just unappreciated geniuses of our time, Wes. That's what we do.
I agree. You are. All right. So I'll give you my fun Falcons little deal here, right? Because since the Falcons and Panthers are both looking for coaches.
That's why I brought it up. It's like, here we are. Here we are. By the way, it's not like the Saints was a given too, by the way. The NFC South seems to be a continual dumpster fire. Somebody's got to every year. Shout out to
and Dennis Allen does such a good job, coaching and leading his players that they run their own plays. Anyway, so here we go. Giglio, you'll love this. So I'm going to give you 3 names. You get to pick the next Falcons coach. Ready?
Mm-hmm.
Kirby Smart, Bill Belichick, Jim Harbaugh.
How about the guy that they really wanted, who was just fired and probably would do a lot of the same things? Vrabel.
Vrabel's going to Foxborough.
Okay.
Are we sure about that? Because if they were going to move on from
that
Belichick,
makes the most sense.
It makes the most sense. But if they were going to move on from Belichick, they would have moved on from Belichick by now. It's Wednesday, and he was doing his Monday.
I don't agree with that at all. I think if they're going to move on from Belichick, they've got to figure out they've got to figure out the compensation of where Belichick's going to go if he's going to coach, because they're going to do this in one swing.
Okay.
They're going to do this like Belichick is, in my opinion, Robert Kraft is going to get a draft pick out of this because Robert Kraft wants a draft pick. The second part of this is it has to be a 2-step process in New England because Belichick is also the GM.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, you can't just dismiss Belichick and go, he's fired. You can't do that. You have to find out how your infrastructure is going to be impacted here. There's a bigger org chart shift in New England than there is some other place because of the fact that the guy does 2 things and he does them at a high level, and done it at a high level for a long time.
Let me rephrase that before we get out of here, specifically with Belichick. Do you think he wants to leave New England?
I don't know that he wants to leave New England. I just don't know that he knows what he wants to do if he's not going to coach New England.
Sure, which then gets to another team like Washington continues to come up as a potential.
I cannot see him going to a new, non-proven owner group that.
Well, then we get to Atlanta, which is.
Yeah, but you got a business guy who would give him full control. I mean, he's got football people around. You got a guy who's a lifer in the business who I think is one of the smartest guys I've ever been around in football, and Rich McKay, who runs the competition committee, who Belichick is familiar with, and the rest of it, you can move the chess pieces. Terry Fontenot worked for Mickey Loomis, and before he became the GM in Atlanta. Terry Fontenot and Belichick, I think, would be a much more symphonic combination. Look, here's the deal. Arthur Smith lost his job on Sunday night or Monday morning at midnight. I would say this. The Atlanta Falcons are a better franchise today than they were 3 years ago when Arthur and Terry were hired. I'm not sure I can say that about some of the other vacancies in the league. Atlanta is a better team. They're much more stable from a salary perspective and a talent perspective than they were 3 years ago. Arthur deserves credit for that, and so does Terry Fontenot. Terry Fontenot is going to be a part of this process, and I don't rule out anything in Atlanta. You could tell me that Bubbles the circus clown is going to be the next head coach of the Falcons, and I would believe a little bit of it just because I think it's that wide open in this particular case.
Wes Durham, ESPN, Atlanta Falcons voice. Wes,
by the way, my game Saturday night is at 8 o'clock, Miami, Virginia Tech in Blacksburg. Next Tuesday night, I'll be in Raleigh at 7. Don't text me. Carolina on Wednesday night at 9 o'clock in Chapel Hill. So don't text me or send me notes.
We will see you on Tuesday. I was going to say, I will see you on Tuesday and Wednesday of next week.
Good.
I'll see you. So I'll just harass you then.
That looks fun. All right. Sounds good. Maybe we'll get a post-game beverage.
Hopefully I'll find a place that's open after the fact. All right, Wes. We'll talk to you later, man.
Wes, we could bring that if you want.
I was going to say, we could just do some lot 4 roses if you want.
Yeah. Hey, and Obius, nice job getting all the equipment to work this time. You guys have a great day.
Wow, Wes. Wow. It's fine.
See ya.
Housekeeping. I'm not mad at Wes because as much as I dish it, I do have to be able to take it. As much as I get on you about your inability to properly handle your computer, it's okay when I screw up.
Struggle's real, Joe.
I will own that. Speaking of technology, I got to make sure we got the right technology for the Tecmo Super Bowl tournament. Shady's, downtown Garner, February 4th. We need contestants. If you're on the fence about this, get off the fence. Join us. It'll be a lot of fun. Just email us, theoggoesdigital@gmail.com, that you want to participate in this Tecmo Super Bowl tournament. $25 to enter. There are
cash
prizes. Hang out. We'll take care of you. It'll be a lot of fun. I know I have a functioning Nintendo.
No, we have enough. The controllers could be. I have a game. I have a system, but one of my controllers doesn't work. So we just need to make sure we have 6 controllers and 3 units.
Yeah, we're definitely going to have to make sure that's the case. T-shirts. Go to breakingtea.com/OG and you can buy some OG merch. We did have a Michigan fan who listens to the podcast buy a shirt from Home Field from using the Home Field promo code OG23.
All right.
So he's like, now I let it pass because he was like, yeah, man, I almost pulled the trigger on that shirt last, on the night that they won when they announced it, yada, yada, yada. And I was like, I was going to get back to it, maybe thinking whatever. But then when I heard you guys talking about like Michigan fans who listen to the podcast that were going to buy something, I had to do it. And he had the promo code used and everything else. So I said, look, man, you have an option. We can either just reimburse you for the purchase or we can send you a hoodie. He's like, hoodie, let's go. So breakingtea.com/OG and get your Obius and Giglio merch. I agree. I thought that was a very good choice. Just like you should make very good choices when it comes to selling your home or buying a home. And that's where Hometown Realty comes into play. Check them out online at myhtr.com. Again, that's myhtr.com. Buy, sell, you can calculate. Most importantly, interest rates are coming down, so you want to be ahead of where the market is going. That's where they can help, Joe.
Yeah, the word frenzy can be overused in certain situations, but I do think the way that the market is going and where inventory is, you want to get ahead of that frenzy. So the best thing to do is go with Hometown Realty. It's myhtr.com. Buy, sell, calculate.
Also, big thanks to Whitaker and Hamer. They are helping us out with that Tecmo Super Bowl tournament. They can help you out with closing on a house or a refinance if that's the case. Or, I don't know, maybe you
stray traffic ticket in downtown for passing somebody at a stoplight.
You should have done that, and they'll help you with that too. So head on over to wh.lawyer. Again, that's wh.lawyer. I did want to circle back to one thing before we bring on Mike Kaye of the Charlotte Observer to talk about the Carolina Panthers and where they are with not just a head coaching search, but a GM search as well, as Scott Fitterer was let go on Monday. You know, we talked about Bill Belichick and where he's going to end up. Is he going to stay with New England? Is there going to be a trade? Because remember, for the longest time this year, the speculation was that Mike Vrabel, there was going to be this swap. The Patriots are going to move on from Bill Belichick, get some sort of compensation from Washington, potentially Atlanta, and then they were going to engage with the Tennessee Titans and get Mike Vrabel to be their head coach.
A little menage action, a little three-way.
However, not happening because the Tennessee Titans decided, you know what?
We don't like making smart moves.
Well, is it they don't feel like making smart moves, or maybe they were of the opinion that we aren't going to get any sort of compensation that we think we're going to get from Mike Vrabel?
Dumb franchises are dumb franchises.
Fair enough.
I mean, I'll also say this: like these NFL teams who fire their coach on the Monday morning after the season ends.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a recruiting class to line up? Like, what's the big hurry? Well, you don't want to pay the guy. I mean, you're gonna have to pay him anyway to go away a little bit.
They want to get it. The social media teams. The social media teams are ready because that's low key my favorite.
It's the clout
part.
Chasing is what you're saying,
dude. I think this is hilarious because you've noticed this over the last couple of years.
Yeah,
right?
You got a month basically. I mean, yes. If your coach is going to be involved in personnel decisions, you want to get that person in place before the draft.
Sure, But what I think is funny is that everything is geared towards content these days. So you notice that what teams will do, and the Panthers will do this too, they will tweet out or put on Instagram, we have completed an interview with such and such. Like, for instance, the Chargers completed an interview with Kellen Moore.
Yeah. The in-house interviews have been completed.
Yeah.
I saw that.
And they're making it like these, it's almost like watching Succession or some other TV show and the next progression and where they are on this. It's all content, man. So maybe they want to get ahead of it because, hey, we have content that we need to make for our own in-house entertainment. And now we got the graphics ready to go. And we've got our list. Because the Panthers put out the list too. Here are the guys that we're targeting. It's all very out in the open. It almost becomes Bachelor, Bachelorette in who's going to get the final rose. But the one thing about Vrabel, after 4 winning seasons with the Tennessee Titans, they're combined 13-21 over the last 2 years in Tennessee. And, you know, it was one of these kind of falling off a cliff type situations at the end of the year. The Tennessee Titans were very, very open about their quote unquote difficult decision. But it is interesting after so much speculation that they're going to be making some kind of swap. They looked at the situation and said, no, and you know how they are with draft picks. You know how NFL teams are with draft picks, that they would just rather move on from Vrabel than try to play the game. Maybe they knew they weren't going to get any compensation because maybe they knew that A, they were going to move on from him, and B, maybe there's really no real market for Mike Vrabel. I don't know. Again, I'm just kind of looking at the situation.
I find that hard to believe.
I'm with you. I am with you on that. I just thought that the move was an eyebrow raiser. Again, before we bring on Mike Kaye, I want to bring this up too. Shout out to our guy, Josh Graham. Hell of a radio tease for Josh Graham. He tweeted this out. The Panthers released a list of assistant coaches they've requested to interview. There's one dark horse candidate that hasn't been talked about much since November that should be taken seriously now. So I did the thing that I love to do.
Clicked on it.
I retweeted it with Dave Doran, which of course starts the let's just spam with terrible names. Luke DeCock chimed in with Larry Fedora. How about Mike O'Kane? What about David Cutcliffe? But I was asleep at the wheel. I should have made this joke. If you were in on the joke, I know you would have made it, but Mark Yarborough won. Matt Canada?
Oh, my guy. He's got to fall up.
That's the question.
There's a lot of openings. There's a lot of head coach openings now.
That's a question. Your guy, Matt Canada.
Now there is a presidential election next year, so that's in play too.
He always finds a way. Always finds a way. Mike Kaye, Charlotte Observer, joining us now on the Heister Automotive Group hotline. Is this the best time of the year to be a beat writer? Joe, you used to be a beat writer. It is coaching search season.
The NFL is an entirely different beast, and Mike does it as good as anybody. So I'm not even going to pretend, but I did love a coaching search.
So it's interesting. I've covered, I think this is my fourth or fifth coaching search. I've never covered a GM search. I've never had to.
Okay.
What I find is the GM stuff, it's a crapshoot. It's really hard to weigh in on a lot of stuff because there's so much that goes on behind the scenes. Unless you talk to people around the league, you're not, there's no, like if it's an assistant GM or a player personnel guy, a lot of people have like stuff to weigh in there, right? Like it's like, there's a lot in that pot. Coaching, it's a little bit different. You can see if a guy was a really good play caller. You can see if he had success that way. So that's new for me. 2 head coaching searches in 2 off seasons when you have an infant kid. And yeah, that's not something I was looking forward to. I thought I was going to go on leave in January and
Panthers had other plans, although you kind of had a sense of how this was going because the season wasn't getting any better. So you knew how this was going to go. All right, let's start backwards. Let's go backwards and then go forward with the firing of Scott Fitterer. And there's a lot of conversation as to what exactly Scott Fitterer did with an involved owner, how much of his decisions were actually his decisions, and how much of that was a Matt Rule decision or a David Tepper decision, X, Y, Z. So, and if you could kind of put a bow on the Scott Fitterer tenure as general manager, a man who said, we want to be in on every deal. Well, how much of it was him involved with these deals?
Well, I think ultimately it's everything's under his umbrella, right? But, if your boss wants something, which technically Matt Rule had final say his first 2 years here, it was abundantly clear when you looked at who he cut after training camp this year, who were his guys and who were not his guys. I think, Brandon Smith was an athletic guy who fit the athletic profile that Matt Rule liked. I think Shi Smith was a guy that I felt the entire offseason like he was kind of on shaky ground. There were, of the guys selected from 2021 to 2022, only 9 of the 17 players are still employed by the team, and one of them was on the practice squad. Look, I think the CMC trade doesn't get made unless the owner is all for it. He's the face of your franchise. And I've said this several times. I think the return they got for him was very good pre-using the picks, but they are magic beans. And so it doesn't matter what type of draft picks you got in return for a guy if you use them to essentially draft Jonathan Mingo and DJ Johnson. I've written about this several times. Day 2 of the draft was one of the worst processes I've ever seen covering an NFL draft. And I started as a draft analyst in the industry. So there was a lot, but I mean, it all kind of falls on him, whether your coaching staff is terrible at evaluating personnel, which by the way, from the outside looking in, Rule and Reich both had pretty tough times with their personnel and figuring out how to use them. I think DJ Chark playing X receiver is a massive malfunction of understanding what your talent is. He's a Z receiver who needs to be, given some space. He's not a press beater. That's just not him. Jonathan Mingo playing Z receiver when he's really a slot receiver, but you have Adam Thielen who you don't want to move out of the slot because he's the only guy that can catch a football. There was a lot going on here. The staff was very big on Miles Sanders. I think ultimately, what this bogs down to is it's great to be a collaborator and a consensus builder, which is what Scott's known as around the league. But at some point as the GM, you have to have the awareness to say, no, no, we're not doing that. That doesn't make sense.
Okay.
And I think that was his biggest problem. We know the old adage, nice guys finish last. Well,
So, Mike, the last time we talked to you, you talked about what the structure could look like for the Panthers, and you had suggested that they probably need like a VP of football operations who's kind of in charge of everything, and then there's the GM who kind of handles the contracts and the daily stuff, and then obviously the coach. As the Panthers are remade this offseason, do you see them going in that direction, or will it be more of a traditional GM, coach, owner type deal?
I think it depends on the GM that they hire, right? I think like if you're going to retain Dan Morgan, you need somebody who really understands the other side of the pillow, so to speak, of running a front office. He's a true personnel man, former player, like, you know, he's not a salary cap guy. There's nothing to that. And I think what's interesting is if you look at like Nick Mateo from the Ravens, if you look at Brant Tillis from the Chiefs, if you look at Alec Hallaby from the Eagles, those are all, you know, quote unquote nerds. Like those guys are numbers dudes. Like that's what vibes with David Tepper. And so I think if you put somebody as EVP of football operations, that doesn't mean they necessarily have to be a football czar. It just means that they help run the business. Like when you're an EVP of football operations, you're also dealing with marketing. You're dealing with PR. You're dealing with all this stuff. If you want your GM to be a true personnel guy, like in the old school manner, and let him cook, you need him to not worry about all that other stuff. Now, Samir Solomon has been here. He negotiates contracts. It is interesting that they are talking to the nerds or whatever you want to call them, instead of like there are some personnel guys. Brandon Brown is a very, very, very legitimate candidate. Champ Kelly it looks really, really good. I got a lot of pushback the other day for saying what he did in his interim stint looked impressive. But when you're an interim head coach, you typically work with the GM even more than you normally would, and you make decisions together. Think about it. They benched Jimmy Garoppolo for a rookie, and then they played well. They got rid of several veterans that were McDaniel's guys. Like, that's impressive. You need to be able to go outside the norm, and I think that's what he did there. I think when you look at some of the guys they didn't interview, they didn't request at least initially, Ian Cunningham, Adam Peters, those are guys who have interviewed for other jobs here before, and both of them are considered two of the better candidates from an executive standpoint. So that's kind of interesting. Maybe they'll look at them down the road. Maybe they got the sense, like there's been a thing with Adam Peters. I've seen it reported that a lot of the times they just think he's going to go back to San Francisco. And so maybe Tepper did not want to waste some time there. But I think from a GM perspective, I would hire the GM first if you could, unless it's Ben Johnson who you really want. And they did not put in a request for Ray Agnew, who is the assistant GM in Detroit.
Wolfblood.
Who is an NC State alum who has played in the league. I mean, he's kind of like an older version of Dan Morgan in a lot of ways.
Okay.
So it'll be interesting to see what they do. There's what I like to call the Shanahan Collective, where it's like a bunch of guys represented by Richmond Flowers, who, you know, has worked with Kyle Shanahan extensively, Frank Smith, Ben Johnson, Bobby Slowick, those guys who all kind of have like a Shanahan influence in their offense. Maybe they like a guy who is kind of under the radar, and maybe it's not Peters.
So here's you mentioned Ben Johnson, and I know they put out this big list of guys that they're going to be talking to, and I'm not going to reel off all the names. It's like 10 different guys. It's Ben Johnson's name keeps coming up, and Ben Johnson was somebody that was attached to the Carolina Panthers last year. And with all these other job openings, he is somebody that is going to be looked at by these other teams. So is he the number one target? Is he the guy that the Panthers ultimately want?
That seems to be the case. I mean, no one's outright said it to me, but everybody brings up him first.
Okay.
Who I talk to. He is a guy who obviously is from Asheville, went to UNC, very smart, worked his way up the Detroit, ladder in coaching. He survived a couple of different coaching tenures there. And he's done a really good job those first 2 years as a play caller. That said, and I've said this on your show before, when you give somebody who is a play caller the head coaching job, you're giving them 75% more responsibility. Mm-hmm. And then you're asking them to still call plays.
Sure.
And I think we saw with Frank Reich from an operational standpoint, it's really difficult to do that. Andy Reid is really the one guy who has shined through as a play caller, an executive type, and but also his in-game decision making has been questioned. His big thing in Philly was situational awareness, and he's gotten better at that, mainly because he is the best quarterback on the planet. In my opinion, he is a top 2 head coach of his era. I mean, I don't even think that's an opinion. I think that's fact. And, I think it's really tough to replicate that. So you're going to take a 37 or 38-year-old and ask them to do the same thing. I don't know if I can barely tie my shoes and I'm 36. So it's one of those things where I just think be careful what you wish for with this young up and coming group. I think one of the guys that appeals to me is Frank Smith, because he is more of a play designer and CEO type. Mike McDaniel calls the plays. It's his offense in Miami, but Frank Smith does so much behind the scenes, I've been told. His players love him. To me, he makes a lot of sense because you're not asking him to go in a bunch of different directions. You're letting somebody run the offense. You're letting somebody run the defense. You have your Shanahan influences. And he can focus on everything else in between. He's got an O-line background. He's got a tight end background. I think, and he's been in the NFL for several years. So it's not like you're going to make the comparison to Matt Rule. You're not going to make the comparison to Frank Reich outside of their first names. I do think there's some interest there, but if you are going to hire a first-year head coach, you better hire somebody with a lot of front office experience.
19 of the last 21 years, we've seen the team go from worst to first. I realize there's a college mentality, I think, for people looking at the Panthers right now to think, oh man, they're Temple football. They'll never be back.
2 years away from being 2 years away.
It's so far away.
Yeah.
But I look at it and people got mad at me on Twitter.
I don't see how you see it. They don't have draft picks.
I made the comp to the Texans. Now the Texans got a couple of things right.
Yeah.
But a couple of years ago, the Texans looked lost, Mike. Sure. Like the owner was problematic. The quarterback didn't want to play for the problematic owner. They couldn't get anything right. They had idiot Bill O'Brien running around, and they gave him all of this control. And now, voila, look at where the Texans are. I'm not saying it's going to happen next year for the Panthers, but do you and or people who follow the NFL really think that the Panthers are that far off?
Well, if we're going to talk about Houston, they fired 2 head coaches before they got to DeMeco Ryans, and DeMeco Ryans really wanted to go there specifically because he had family there. He had been a legacy player there. There was, I mean, I don't want to say they lucked into CJ Stroud, but the choice was made for them, right? Like there was a lot going on there, right? What I would say is this team, from the outside looking in, has an owner who is quick on the trigger, who now doesn't have a first overall pick. If you didn't like Bryce Young and weren't willing to make the same deal that they were, you probably don't want this job, or it's not a good fit for you. The offense needs to be completely rebuilt outside of the 33-year-old wide receiver and Bryce Young. The offensive line might, there's some realness to the Icky to guard situation. That's very
all I'm hearing from Mike is, yeah, dude, no.
Well, here, let me put it in perspective too. It gets even worse. Your top 2 players on defense, who are your top 2 players probably on your team outside of Derrick Brown, are free agents. One of them is going to need a skyrise type contract. The other is going to be one of the more complicated contracts in Frankie Louvu because he plays basically 4 different positions. It's tough, man. Like they do have a lot of cap space, but when you look at who has more, it's a pretty deep list.
Yeah.
And I just think something that somebody told me who represents coaches is that they're going to have a tough time filling out a staff because while assistant coaches are given guaranteed contracts, they have offset language. And so let's say you're a young coach who's moving his young family from LA or Seattle or Las Vegas or Denver to Charlotte. If there's another quick trigger move or he doesn't like how a certain position group is working, yeah, sure, you've got that guaranteed money, but you're a young coach. You don't want to be out of it. There's a stigma that if you're out of the league for a year or two, you're in trouble. And from there, it has offset language. So let's say, yeah, cool, you get fired in Charlotte, but you know, Arizona's got an opening and you get hired. Well, you're paying for all this moving and uprooting your family and creating a little bit of strife there. And so I think you're going to see that while they had the all-star staff, whatever that means this year, it's going to be a little bit more complicated in bringing in proven guys to, I mean, look, Arizona had the same issue. Like they had a first-year offensive coordinator, first-year defensive coordinator. Their staff wasn't particularly impressive. And they did a relatively good coaching job, but, you know, it's going to take time. I think they're really looking to compete in 2025. That's when their salary cap just like explodes. And what the plan would be from the outside looking in is to sign guys to bonuses, like really big contracts this year, with it kind of set up with dummy years, with it pushed into next year. You get down to the, not to get too in the salary cap minutia, but give them a huge signing bonus, make their salaries basically at the minimum you can do it, and then take on those charges the next couple of years. So you're taking from next year to help this year. But even then, you know, yes, money at the end of the day is the big deal.
Do they even have their second, third, and fourth picks?
Yeah, they have their second. Okay. Yeah. So 33.
Right. Show me a good team, Mike, as you know, and I'll show you a team that hit on their second, third, and fourth round picks.
Right. And look, you know what's interesting is Scott Fitterer came from Seattle, where they were terrible with first-round picks, but terrific with second, third, and fourth-round picks, which also makes it very curious why that didn't happen here. I think
almost like there's bigger problems with the Carolina Panthers.
Look, the third-round pick, DJ Johnson, they literally admitted right after picking him is there was a run on pass rushers, and he was like their last draftable.
Nope.
And if you watch the Panthers in-house media stuff, oh, we won the trade from the trade chart, but winning the trade on the trade chart doesn't matter if you draft a guy who's an edge rusher who can't edge rush, who's 25 and is just learning the position.
Wait, Chandler Zavala wasn't at the combine. Is anybody going to take him? He texted us. We should take him.
Totally take him.
Never mind that he wasn't any good in college.
So I'll push back on that. I really like Chandler Zavala. I think that he eventually can be very good.
Eventually,
this was the biggest nightmare of a season I've ever seen for a player. I cannot remember
in the fourth round. Was it the fourth round?
Yeah, but like, I mean, he had a serious next
round.
Yeah. I mean, look, I think he is very raw when you play it like the school he played for before NC State. It's a tough beat, man. They moved him around. He didn't have a training camp. Like, there's a lot going on there. But what I will say is, like, Jonathan Mingo, I was like, here's the thing. This is the problem with this organization the last 3 years is compounded mistakes. So if I can take you through a little bit of a timeline, I know we're up against it.
No, I like it.
So, okay. So in 2022, the rule staff is enamored with Matt Corral. So they trade up in the third round, trade their future third round pick.
Yeah, actual assets. Yes.
Right. Okay. Let's fast forward to this year. Okay. They trade Christian McCaffrey. The second round pick's the 61st overall pick. Oh, great. This will help us save the 39th overall pick by trading that along with for Bryce Young, get the number 1 overall pick. The 39th overall pick is a gem. It's a top 40 pick. It's basically got first round value. So what do you do if you're a smart organization when you only have you come into a draft with only 6 draft picks? You trade back because you have several needs. Oh, didn't do that. Drafted Jonathan Mingo, a slot receiver who has Anquan Bolden-like traits, but his best year was like 800 yards. Who also, by the way, was like injured relentlessly during his time at Ole Miss. Then, and by the way, 2 picks before B.J. Ojulari, who's a pass rusher. Then you realize, oh my God, all these pass rushers are coming off the board. Man, it would have been great to have this year's third round pick that was like in the mid 60s. Oh, wait, you don't have him because Matt Corral's the trade with the Patriots. So you say to yourself, hey, let's trade up. we have a 3rd and a 4th round pick from the McCaffrey trade. Pass rushers are a premium position. Let's trade both of those. Trades up with that to number 80 and drafts DJ Johnson. Here's the issue there. You have created a problem because, one, you traded up for Matt Corral, who didn't play a game for this franchise.
Snap, right?
Mm-hmm.
Nope. And then you didn't trade back. Well, if you would have traded back, you probably would have acquired another 3rd round pick to draft DJ Johnson.
Here's my premise for the Panthers. They have made every absolute wrong move.
Yeah.
Starting with Matt Rule and let's take everybody on defense in the draft. That'll be great. Look at our strategy. We're so smart. Let me take JC Horn instead of Justin Fields when he's just sitting there staring at us. Like, they've made all of these mistakes, all of them. And the one thing that they used to be really good at was drafting in the 1st round. Now they're not even good at drafting in the 1st round. So if you can just hit this little reset button and have competent adults, I'm telling you, and if Mike, not to insult Mike, but if Mike can figure this out,
If these jabronis on this podcast
just so
can
you
figure it out,
know, if Mike can figure it out, then everybody else can too.
Mike Kaye, Charlotte Observer.
I mean, wow, what a high bar you set,
right?
for me.
Right? I mean, it's kind of a theme with what we do. We all got it figured out, yet we don't have the jobs. Anyway, Mike Kaye, Charlotte Observer, we appreciate the time. We'll catch up with you next week, man, because I'm sure there's going to be a lot of movement.
Yeah, you got nothing going on. Don't worry.
Yeah, don't worry.
It's nothing. My schedule's free.
Your schedule's totally free. We'll work something out. We'll get an update. We'll talk to you later, man.
All right. Thanks for having me, guys.
Big thanks to Matt Davis, State Farm. Check him out online, insuregarner.com. Call him directly at 919-779-8277. And if you don't remember those numbers, if you cannot remember the website, even something as simple as theoginsurance.com, just message me like one of our listeners did. Hey, who's the insurance guy again, the State Farm guy? Why, that's Matt Davis. Here's his number. Call him directly. There's a real person there, Joe.
Costanza. Yeah, you just got to keep saying these things, man. But, you want to save money? Best way to do it, have a conversation. 919-779-8277. Call Matt's office. You'll talk to a real person. You'll save real money. Everybody's a winner.
And thanks to Home Field. We mentioned them earlier, but for real, go to homefieldapparel.com. Use the promo code
Get
OG23.
that Michigan swag.
They got new Michigan swag.
Apparently, we're huge in this.
Save 15%. Okay. And you can use that promo code OG23. You can also just start getting hyped for the basketball season. I got that Big 4 Wake Forest shirt that you gifted me. There's a lot of great NC State gear, a lot of great Duke gear, and a lot of great UNC gear. So get yourself outfitted with these retro-inspired designs for now until the ACC tournament. And who knows, maybe we might have a new shirt coming out here relatively soon that you might want to get out, get ready for. Make some room in your closet. Just saying.
Next topic, please.
So the final AP Top 25 came out, which always makes me wonder why.
No, you gotta have the final record.
I would rather the AP give me an entirely way too early preseason Top 25 than a final AP Top 25.
You got to stick with tradition. You got to close the book on the season. For 70 years, it was the way that the national champion was decided.
Yeah, so we got Michigan, shockingly number 1. Washington, shockingly number 2. Why don't they just get a little disruptive? Like, yeah, you know what? I didn't like the way Washington played. I'm going to elevate Georgia to number 2 because I think they probably would have had a better game.
They jumped Georgia over Alabama.
They did do that. So Michigan, Washington, Texas, Georgia, followed by Alabama. Florida State drops 2 spots to number 6. Of course, why are you punishing them for a game they played against Georgia where like 28 players were missing?
They only dropped in 1 spot though. They had them 5.
The
previous week.
Oh, they're tied for 6th. My bad. That's why. Yeah. That's why it looks that way. So I'm scrolling, and look at that. Louisville at 10-4. They finished at 19. Clemson at 20. NC State at 21. And we're going to start counting SMU, folks, at ACC. 22.
Yeah.
So what kind of Dave Dorn gets paid for a top 25 finish, right?
He does not in the AP. He gets it for. Here's where you would love this.
Oh,
his bonus is based on the final college football playoff ranking, which does not obviously does they do not release a ranking after the bowl games are played.
But they were in the last college football playoff ranking, were they not?
Correct.
Okay, so he got paid.
So maybe this is why his teams don't know how to win in bowl games because he doesn't get a bonus for what the bowl. Well, he does get a bowl.
He gets a bowl
performance.
bonus.
Yes, he does. He also gets a bonus if they had won 10 games.
Okay.
But here we are.
So the college football playoff 4-team iteration is over.
Good.
Which is cool. Good. Now we get the 12-team. And there have been now 5 undefeated college football playoff champions. 5 total in 10 years. That includes 2018 Clemson, 2019 LSU, 2020 Alabama, 2022 Georgia. Yes, folks, remember, Georgia did lose in 2021. They lost to Alabama in the SEC championship game, right? So Michigan, 2023. Out of those 5s, you want some old school radio, Joe?
Yes.
Rank them.
I mean, LSU 19 were colored by all of their success of the players in the pros.
Yes.
I hate it when people are like, we kind of misremember certain college teams because those players did not excel in the NFL.
Right.
That doesn't like Tim Tebow, for example.
That LSU squad, dude.
Right. So, look at Tim Tebow. You go to 06 Florida or 08 Florida, and you're like, that was a squad, but then you're like, oh, but Tim Tebow wasn't that good. And it's like, no. He was really freaking good in college.
Yeah.
We don't have that. The 2 teams we revere the most are the 01 Miami Hurricanes and the 19 LSU Tigers because they put stacks on stacks in the NFL and then had guys who were bona fide Hall of Fame stars.
You could even make the argument
in the NFL
that the Miami team that lost to Ohio State on a BS pass interference call was even better than the one that actually won the national championship.
Correct.
More so because they coached themselves, which is even more impressive.
And that's the kind of Ed Orgeron was dialing it up. Come on. I hesitate when people are like, how about this?
That's a good point.
But how about this? Even Joe Brady, as we saw in his brief NFL stint as a play caller, knew how to push the right buttons for Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, and Joey Burr.
So are we putting that 2019 LSU team at the top? Ahead of that stack? Again, we're talking about how we have things colored.
That would be amazing. And
by the way, stack them ahead of that Clemson team?
Yeah. And by the way, the pandemic 2020 team was actually Saban's best team. A to Z. 1 through 40, it was his best team. And they murder-balled people, by the way.
Here's what we can agree, though, right? I think this is where we can agree. This Michigan team would be 5th.
Oh, out of the 5?
Out of the 5.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Not to say that they couldn't compete, because, I mean, clearly their defense is really, really great. They go about playing the game a certain way. But when you look at the offensive skill position,
right?
And I know you brought up, McCarthy as a potential, NFL guy if Jim Harbaugh goes. I don't.
No, he'll be picked.
I don't see it
early.
I don't see it. If that's the case, then you talk about chasing things. You're clearly chasing something. If McCarthy's going to be, if you're going to waste a 1st-round pick on McCarthy, what is wrong? What is wrong with the quarterback market if that's the guy you're going to spend a 1st-round draft pick on?
Don't save that.
No. I'm not saying
you're reviewing.
That's fine. You can write it down. Okay. Let's say he does go in the 1st round. I'll roast it then.
That's fine. I said the same thing about Bryce Young last year. I did not think he was a franchise quarterback.
So I think we could all agree, though, that Michigan, based on what you see with those other stacked teams, especially when I'm looking at it offensively, Michigan gets put 5th.
Yes.
What do you do with that Clemson team, though? That's the question. Because remember, that's a Clemson team that beat Alabama.
And that's also where we get lost in Justin Ross, even though he hasn't had success in the NFL, was a really good college receiver and had a hell of a game against the Crimson Tide. T. Higgins, Travis Etienne, they had guys. Like, this is when the sun was shining on Death Valley. Yes. I mean, that was, and Trevor Lawrence obviously is a baller. Clemson's offensive line has always been a little bit of a problem. Their defensive front, I mean, they put 3 or 4 guys. Now they've all kind of flamed out other than Christian Wilkins. Good, really good team, all-time ACC team. But so when you're talking about that LSU team, you really are talking about because they had guys on defense too, Joe.
So 2019 LSU number 1.
Yeah.
2020 Alabama 2.
Yeah.
2022 Georgia 3.
Wow, I'm really glossing over Georgia and how freaking good they were.
You talk about murder ball,
but they should have lost to Ohio State if Ohio State hadn't gone into the portal and gotten Carolina's kicker.
See,
ay.
So Georgia 2022 3,
Cost me so much.
Clemson 4, Michigan 5. Is that our consensus?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Every time we talk about college football, is brought to you by Wings Over. I don't know. Maybe you want to debate with your friends.
You feel good? That was a little radio.
I know. Like, let's put it right here.
Applause.
What's your Mount Rushmore of undefeated college football teams? Obviously,
I love how they put 10 years in the end zone for like no reason. Like,
because people are getting wistful.
I guess it is still the college football playoff. Just there's more teams.
It's an iteration.
Okay.
That's all it is.
I saw that in the end zone on Monday night, and I'm like,
well, I also, by the way, interesting that you bring that up, because it now just comes to mind where the fact that they commemorate 10 years of the college football playoff and we're kind of sending it off into the sunset and having this kind of conversation, it does further prove the point that it was never really a playoff. It was an invitational.
Correct.
Because now that we're getting into the 12-team playoff, it actually is going to be a true
never forget
playoff.
And understand this, because this is a different world, right? Like the BCS legitimately was going to be labeled as a cartel legally. That's why they had to change it.
Of course.
All right. Never forget and always pay attention to the words, because words matter. They don't claim to be the national champions, because that would imply that it is a playoff. It's always the CFP national champions, because they know they're not inclusive.
Yes.
And they don't want to get sued.
Yes, that is true. All right. So big thanks to Wings Over, Wings Over Raleigh, Wings Over Chapel Hill, Wings Over Greenville. You want to have a debate with your friends? Do it over Wings.
Do it over Wings.
With
sweet,
beer and all that
chili,
fun stuff.
Free parking in the back. What else do you want on Hillsborough Street? Doesn't get any better than that. Ryan Malley's crew does such a great job.
Big thanks to Mosquito Authority and Pest Authority for sponsoring Ovius and Giglio. Check them out online, bugsbite.com. We just had an incredible amount of rain in the last couple of weeks. Big storms coming through yesterday. Hopefully everybody's okay. You're getting power back, all that stuff. But you might have exposed some moisture issues because of all the rain that we've been getting. Pest Authority can come in and help you out. You had that done.
I did, a 360 moisture barrier underneath my house. Now, I think you have like old school actual crawl space. Like you have to like get on your hands and knees.
No, I can actually get into my first house. I literally had to get on my hands and knees and crawl around. This one is more of like a hunched over space.
Now, I can like full on walk around and like live down there if I wanted to.
I'm surprised you haven't moved down there.
I briefly might have in the spring of like 18.
Okay, fair enough.
So, but when you're down there and you have the water, and I live on a hill the way that I do, you don't even realize it. Like mold and mildew can become an issue. You really don't want that, particularly if you are sitting here thinking, well, we might be moving. You want to put your house on the barcode that somebody comes to inspect your house and sees mold and mildew? Guess what?
You don't want that.
You are up the creek, sir. So don't put yourself in that situation. Bugsbite.com. Hayes Lancaster does not believe in contracts, but he does believe in saving you money. So go with those bundles and figure out what's best for your house.
Also, big thanks to Breeze Through. Check them out. Locations across the triangle. Locations across North Carolina. We got the Tajma, or as some people have called it, the McDee's Through.
McDee's Through. They're very clever because there's a McDonald's in that.
They're off a High House. Obviously, there's one right outside PNC Arena. That's kind of like our home base when we've done some live shows.
Be there tonight.
Cave.
Are you kidding?
You got to fuel up for some Carolina NC State tonight at PNC Arena. So check them out. Breeze Through, locations across. And of course, as Joe has, the lifetime refills when it comes to coffee, because it is getting into those 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock basketball tips. Got to stay caffeinated, man. Got to stay caffeinated.
8 o'clock tip.
Also, big thanks to Butcher's Market, new location, Lake Boone Shopping Plaza, and of course, locations across the Triangle and in Wilmington. So head on over to Butcher's Market to not just get things to throw on the grill, but I can't stress this enough, prepared meals are where it's at.
Here's the combo I'm going for tonight. I'm going to go to Lake Boone Shopping Center. I'm going to get the tortellini salad, which I enjoy tremendously. That's really good
stuff. I get bummed when they don't have it.
Okay. I'm going to get the tortellini salad. Then I'm going to go over to the arena. I'm going to park. I'm going to walk over to the Breeze Through. I'm going to get some coffee in my mug. And I'm going to hope that either Ron or Bob are working at the arena and they'll let me bring my mug in.
Gotcha. I'm sure they
will.
Good
plan?
That sounds like a good plan. I am sure they will do that with you. Joining us on the Heister Automotive Group hotline is Gina Stevens. She is with Raleigh Magazine. She's got a podcast, Office Talk, with Raleigh Magazine. And Gina, you tagged me and Gilio yesterday on an updated podcast related to Backyard Bistro. It was interesting because we were talking about Backyard Bistro earlier that day.
It's like your ears were ringing
with Luke, and I see this. I'm like, well, that kind of changes the conversation. And in that podcast clip that you had put out on social media that picked up some steam, you guys had talked about how basically everybody at Backyard Bistro was fired before Christmas, and my spidey senses started to tingle. And I went, wait a minute, that doesn't sound quite right, considering that they've stayed open throughout, and the Canes just put out a press release in terms of how they're operating Backyard Bistro going forward. So what exactly kind of led to this conversation you had on your podcast, and where things kind of stand now with Backyard Bistro?
Yeah, I mean, it was a conversation, as you guys do. You get lots of people who share information with you. Back in October, we got tipped off from a very reliable source that we checked that Gale Force Sports Entertainment was purchasing Backyard Bistro, and with the intention of flipping it into a sports book. And there was all kinds of details. And as we all know, plans get out there, they get into it, money changes, costs go up, details change. But we shared what we knew. And that was that they were purchasing it in January with the intention of keeping it open, closing at some point, converting it to a sports book, and reopening hopefully in time for playoffs. Very vague, right? So early last week, the same source tipped us off that the deal had gone south. Not the deal to buy it, but the conversion to a sports book wasn't going to happen, that the price tag was just too high. It came back at $1 million. And again, source shared some things about Christmas and people being let go. I think there's, obviously we have now heard from the Canes. They've shared factual details, according to them, that no one was fired before Christmas. I think, week of, I'm not going to get into whether it was the week before Christmas, the week after. I don't think anyone was fired. I'm sure there's some people who left who maybe thought they were going to stay on and have a role in maybe a big sports book and run it. I don't know. They say that no one was let go. Only people left who couldn't pass their background check. That they needed to be employed by the Canes.
Yeah, my understanding is that in order to stay, now that they're running it, they have to pass background checks, and the people who were not retained were the ones who did not pass that background check, which also speaks to, I know, Joe, you've talked about this, when it comes to a sports book, background checks are kind of important.
Right.
If the gambling lords ruled the country, we would all be better off.
A lot more fun.
Up on the checker uppers, for sure.
They make sure things run.
So, Gina, I'm a little bit confused in terms of, I always got the sense from the Canes, from Tom Dundon, to be specific, that they wanted to build a sports book at PNC Arena, and what they would do as a stopgap would basically have Backyard Bistro as a place. Now, our traditional definition of sports book changes in 2024 because of your phone. So I just assumed it would be a place that they would run, that would serve food. Maybe they would renovate, modestly.
A window, if you want.
I don't even think they will, because remember, they're cashless as an operation over at the arena.
So you'll need a help desk, because in Detroit, for instance, I'll keep using Detroit as an example, Little Caesars Arena, they have kiosks around to handle any sort of issues. I have a question.
This isn't working. Yeah,
exactly. And I think that's probably what you're looking at with a small conversion. And my understanding, Gina, with talking with people over at the Carolina Hurricanes, elements of a sports book at Backyard Bistro are still in play.
All I can say is we are not in the deal. We're not part of it. We report the news that we hear. And this is one of those things, we hear a lot of stuff about sports and about development, and people say things and things change. I was told very clearly that the price tag for the conversion they wanted to make was $1 million. And again, my editor and I took a tour of PNC with Jeff Merritt, head of Centennial Authority. He walked us through and he said, our game plan is we want a sports book in the arena.
Mm-hmm.
That can't happen overnight, obviously. And so it made sense when they said they were considering Backyard Bistro. It also makes sense that, everything we're hearing is when anybody wants to build anything right now, the prices are higher and they're going, ooh, maybe not that much.
Yeah. Money is not cheap right now.
Money is not cheap. Nothing's cheap.
The rates are pretty high right now.
And so I asked yesterday on the call, I said, so, you want to tell me, are you doing a sports book? Are you still thinking about a sports book? And they go, am I wrong? And they said, no comment. Gotcha. And so, I understand it's their story to tell.
Mm-hmm.
I think the thing that's lost in all of this is that part of the reason we did a podcast on it was people are excited. People want to know what's going on. They're hearing about all the exciting things. Dundon said, if we can't take the arena to downtown, let's bring downtown to the arena. So people are excited to hear what's out there. They want to know. And I think any movement, but up to date, it's been pretty tight-lipped on everything.
So are you standing by the statement you made yesterday that the sports book at Backyard Bistro is canceled?
I am standing by that part.
Okay. Gotcha.
And I've had a really good source that I've trusted and has been with me for years. And I believe, did the whole part about whether contracts weren't kept or somebody didn't pass a background check, and they end up out the door.
Mm-hmm.
There's those fine details that, we couldn't get. So, we were wrong on that part, I guess, in terms of timing and why someone might have been let go.
Mm-hmm.
But to summarize, if I may,
sure.
I feel like, and Joe learned this in Detroit, and Gina, you may be a shark. I don't know. You might be out there running to the border like I do to go place bets.
Joe,
I could be wrong.
Joe crosses the border, hangs out in a Bojangles parking lot, and opens up a phone app. So that's what
I think there's like pre-2018 concepts of what a sports book actually is, that you need this brick and mortar setup.
Sure.
That you have to have the board with the green and orange neon and with all the lines and all the odds and all this other stuff. I think the Canes, and all of our conversations with Tom Dundon we record and put out there. So all I can figure out here from that $1 million price tag, which makes sense, is they said, why would we put $1 million into something that's only going to be temporary?
Right.
Which is what the Backyard Bistro would be.
Best case 3 years. Yeah.
I mean, you want to renovate and do it right. You're going to renovate and do it right at the arena.
Right.
What your permanent site would be. I think what's important, though, for people like me is, can I go to this Backyard Bistro and place bets?
Mm-hmm.
And I think as long as you could do that, you can call it whatever you want to call it.
Right.
That's what I want to do.
We call this a studio. It really is just a 10 by 10 space in downtown Raleigh.
This is our office. Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it is what it is. So I guess we can close the conversation on this with Gina from Raleigh Magazine. I think what ends up happening, and I'm guilty of this from time to time, is that we get caught up in what is sold as a vision. You know how many times I've seen a downtown vision plan that's going to include XYZ. I'm still waiting for that like permanent amphitheater in downtown Raleigh. Right. Speaking of John Kane, like that downtown South development at some point will eventually take off. As a North Hills resident, I know what it was supposed to look like versus what it actually is. And as a Disney adult, I know very well about how things are sold and then ultimately how they end up. So I guess the ultimate takeaway here is this is a long process, and things that are discussed when they announce versus what the actual results are, there's going to be some ebbs and flows to it. And that's how we get these conversations, right?
Absolutely. And part of the, I'm a season ticket holder of the Canes. I love sports. I'm a Georgia Bulldog. I mean, I love it all. And so,
rub it in, Gina. Just rub it in.
Yeah.
No.
We'll know what real football is at some point.
But so I'm a big sports fan, and I love it when stuff comes up, and I'm excited about what's going in around the arena, and certainly not trying to make anyone look bad. But I think there is a thirst, a desire. People want to know what's happening. They get excited about it.
Gina, we appreciate it. Raleigh Magazine, Office Talk is the name of the podcast. And we will talk to you later. And maybe we'll have a debate about whether Georgia actually belonged in that college football playoff.
Amen. Thanks for having me.
So do you want to say it?
I see the graphic. Let's get out of here on some Hey Joe questions. It's, let me look, Wednesday. That means they're open. Go over to Oakwood Pizza Box right there on Person Street, right across from the world famous Krispy Kreme. Say hello to Anthony. Get yourself a square pie. Get yourself a Narragansett or order online. OakwoodPizzaBox.com.
I guess this is my day to take strays today. That's fine. Let's say what's up to Nick. The Bomani guest appearance was awesome. Every time Bomani's on, it's awesome. Always love our conversation with him. Great job, quote unquote, navigating some of that subject matter. You are a braver man than me. What?
His Southern Indiana take. Like there are times where I'll just listen to the show in the car, and then there's times like I'll put it on the computer.
Sure.
I was practicing Dutch shuffleboard to get ready for Aho last night.
Yeah,
and
we
I
have some content coming.
I had the show on, and I spit out my drink when he was
like, I've been through Southern Alabama. Let's talk about this.
Southern Indiana.
Or yeah, Southern Indiana.
That's not a gas station.
Look,
you loiter.
Look, at some point, as we talked about with Wes earlier, sometimes you just gotta let the conversations happen.
Yeah,
simple as that.
That's the point. The whole point of the podcast.
From Young Left-Hander catching up on Monday's show, got sideswiped by a Harold Miner reference. Fun fact: I played intramural basketball with his brother. I forgot the name of the song. It's by Benny. It's like one of these collab tracks with these guys. It's like this crew called Griselda. They're from Buffalo. And the guy's name is Benny the Butcher. There's this other guy, Conway the Machine, and all this other stuff, right? Stove God Cooks is another one of these guys. I think it's Stove God that makes like the reference was something like turning up the heat, something like I'm Harold Miner. And you know that Leonardo DiCaprio meme where he from forgot the name of the movie.
Tarantino movie.
The Tarantino
Once Upon a
movie.
Time in Hollywood.
Thank you. Where he gets up and he points. That was me. Like Harold Miner reference? Baby Jordan?
By the way,
let's go.
That all of that thing that you just spit out about names or whatever that group was.
Yeah.
This is why you can't keep Mike McDaniel and Mike McCarthy straight. Because you have all of this other shit occupying in your brain.
What?
I can't even repeat what you just said. You lost me, but you're like, okay, that was so-and-so the butcher. That was so-and-so the machine. And I'm like, how freaking obscure are we getting here, Joe?
There are times where my older son, Caleb, will reference something and he looks at me like,
and they're from Buffalo.
He's like, how do you know that?
What?
I was like, because your dad's extremely online. I'm sorry.
That felt like Little Joe reads the album liners and memorizes everything. That's what that felt like to me.
Yeah, you mean Joey.
Joey.
From UNC.
Not the Nene, but Joey.
UNC owns Duke. That's a hell of a Twitter name. UNC favored by 5 tonight. I get UNC winning 77-67. What do you have?
Why are they asking you for gambling
I don't
advice?
know. I'm not the gambling guy.
Interesting.
Maybe people get us confused all the time.
Is it up to 5?
Never forget the time that I was at a UNC football game at Keenan, and I think at that point you were covering UNC.
Persona non grata, yes.
But you were covering UNC.
Yeah,
football at
no,
that time.
it was the year after I stopped.
Oh, anyway, so
It was 11.
And I think Brownlow can
12.
I think Brownlow can verify this for me. But we're walking
11.
off the field.
Yeah,
and I had some guy in the blue zone yelling at me, "Giglio! Giglio!" I look up. He's like, "You suck!" And I'm like, "I'll let him know. Thanks. I'm the other Joe." It's been going on for years, man. Going on for years. All right. 2 YouTube comments. What?
I'm just looking at the college basketball scores from last night. Number 1 and number 2 lost last night.
Oh, yeah. After all this business about Houston, can they go the distance? And it's Houston's war. I love this about college basketball.
My Wildcats looked good though last night, eh?
Nothing Man's happy that we gave the Deke some love yesterday.
Is that our guy?
That's our guy.
Is he still mad at us?
No, he's not mad at. Actually, he's mad at you about your Green Bay take.
What was the Green Bay take?
Since I guess, did we say that Green Bay had no business in the playoffs? I don't remember.
I don't
that.
think they should be in the playoffs, but yeah, I mean,
So Nothing Man points out that Green Bay finished the season 6-2, defeated the defending defending champs Chiefs, the Vikings, the Rams. Then why do both of you say they have no business being in the playoffs? Most analysts are saying that if you are Dallas, sitting at number 2, waiting for number 7 to come visit your stadium, you do not want to see Green Bay with nothing to lose.
Sure.
That's going to be more about the Dallas Cowboys than it is about the Green Bay Packers, but that's neither here nor there. From Greg, my view since the teams were announced is that the best 4 teams were not in this invitational, referring to the college football playoff. And it wasn't because of FSU. Thought if they truly wanted the best 4 teams, then Georgia would have been in that Final Four. That alone led me not to believe that, believe what they were selling. I agree. I think as most people have come to find out, Georgia has elevated in it would have been interesting to see. And we'll get that finally with the 12-team playoff. And from 83 Cardiac Pack, Joel Berry just said on a Tar Heel podcast that it isn't a rivalry. Thoughts? You know what? I feel like this is the time of the year when we need to points to sign. Okay. When it comes to somebody from Carolina saying that the NC State game, specifically in basketball, the NC State game isn't a rivalry. That's the feature, not a bug.
Sure.
Part of the rivalry dynamics between NC State and North Carolina is for North Carolina to tell NC State, you are not our rival. That's the hook. That's playing the hits. If I was a top 40 radio programmer this time of the year, I'd be playing that one every hour on the hour. Okay. That's the hit. That's what Carolina fans do. And it riles NC State fans up. And then there's the back and forth. I mean, that's what happens.
I think there's a difference between the players and the fans.
Agree.
Yeah. Now, Joel Berry's situation specifically, and I remember talking to him about this. That was the year I covered Carolina, and I said, "Okay, you're saying you're not rivals with State," and he was like, "Yeah, I was recruited by Duke, and I know all the Duke players, and I'm friends or whatever with the Duke people, and we respect each other.
Yeah,
they're on our level.
Yeah,
State hasn't won anything. Fair enough." They don't recruit the same players we do. Fair enough. Mm-hmm. But your coach really cares for a reason. Mm-hmm. And that was, and anytime you get Theo Pinson, I love his podcast. I love all the stuff that he does.
Yeah, he's great.
And he talked about how much they hated State because they would talk, apparently. The players would talk and be like, "Oh, you're on our level." And it's like, "No, you're not. Go away."
But that's the point. That's part of the dynamic is ultimately my point. So if you're an NC State fan who's still getting triggered by the fact that a Carolina fan says,
no,
or a Carolina player
this
says,
is very different.
They're not a rival.
Yeah.
That's the point. That's the point. We'll see what happens tonight. And obviously we'll talk about it tomorrow. We will be live again. OG live OG. Have we figured out?
It's Sleek Fleet, OG live.
OG. Well, that's the part that I was trying to get clarification on. It's OG live.
Correct.
Okay. Gotcha. So now that I know it's OG live, I can then throw. Right. I know Sleek Fleet is at the top of that. I just wanted to make sure that I had the live and OG in the right place. So
correct.
Sleek Fleet, OG live, 2:00 on YouTube. We'll see you then.